Hello everybody and welcome to week 7 of the English Conversation program. Today we are going to be preparing for the midterm exam. I'm going to be reviewing the important things we have studied so far, and we're going to be practicing some exam questions. So, as I told you last week, your midterm exam will be done online. The exam is based on questions from the class assignments, which is based on the textbook units 2, 4, 5 and 6. It will be during your normal class day, Wednesday, May 6th, so next Wednesday. I will post the test around 1 p.m. and I'll send a message 10 minutes before the exam is posted just to remind everybody. You will have 1 hour 30 minutes to complete the exam and post it to the e-learning website. So those are the basic pieces of information you need to know about the exam. I'll be giving you some more detailed information as today's video lesson goes on. So for today's class, you will need your textbook. Textbook is a good place to review all of the useful vocabulary and grammar. There are 2 documents again for today's class, today's assignment worksheet and today's lecture presentation. The assignment worksheet looks like this, nice and short today, some questions and a writing part here. And the PDF file just has all of today's PowerPoint slides. So, before we go on to that, we're going to go over some of the answers from last week's assignment. So we started last week with some vocabulary about different abilities. So in our textbook we already had 8 abilities. We had dance, draw, fix computers, paint, play the guitar, sing, speak French and swim. So all you had to do was list some other abilities, things that you can do. So I made a list here of some things. I can cook, I can make presentations, I can eat spicy food. If we notice, all of them are following the same structure. I can, then the ability. I can play video games, but not very well. I can drive, I can play piano, I can play football, I can play golf, I can read. So these were just some examples. I'm sure there's lots of abilities that you have, and hopefully you wrote them down last week. Part 2 we had last week was the listening. Now, there was a lot of questions here, and it was quite a short listening. So I think maybe you had to listen 3 or 4 times. That's no problem, as long as you got the answers. Should also notice as well, my answers are always using full sentences. I'm not just writing the answer. I'm trying to use the grammar in the question to answer. So this is especially useful for your exam next week, because in the exam I'll be asking you to make full sentences. So, question 1 last week, what is the company name? The company name is Top Talent. What is the woman's name? Her name is Pamela Wells. Can she sing? Well, here the type of question has changed a little bit. Can at the beginning tells us the answer will be yes or no. So, can she sing? No, she can't. What 2 instruments does the man ask about? Well, he asks about the guitar and the piano. And finally, what can the woman do? She can dance. So, these were all of the answers from last week. Notice all of them are using full sentences. And the last part from last week, we were doing our questions. So we had to answer the question, then give our 2 pieces of extra information. Now, these exercises we've been doing each week with the extra information are going to be really useful for the exam, because in the exam you're going to have 4 writing questions where you have to give lots of information. So I've given some examples again. What can you do well? Well, I can play guitar well. I have played for 30 years. I usually play guitar in my living room. So there we've got some extra information. Can you draw? No, I can't draw. My drawings always look like a 5-year-old drew them. I think it's very difficult for me to learn drawing now. So again, some good extra information. Number 3, my answer was I can speak 3 languages, but only one well. I can speak English, some Korean, and a little French, and I would like to speak Korean fluently. So extra information again. And the last one was about something we can't do but would like to do. So I can't play the piano, but I would like to. When I hear a piano, it makes me feel relaxed. I would like to teach my son how to play piano as well. So there was my extra information, all relating to that question. So as I said, these exercises here are going to be very useful for the writing parts in the exam next week. So let's go on to that. Today's lesson, week 7, our midterm exam review first of all. So the exam will test you on the following units. So Unit 2 was about family. Unit 4 was about daily life. Unit 5 was about free time. And Unit 6, work and play. So jobs and abilities. So some information again. It's going to be a written exam. I will upload the exam worksheet at 1 p.m. You will have 1 hour 30 minutes to complete. You should upload your completed exam to the e-learning website. If your submission is late, you will lose points from your final score. So 1 hour 30 minutes is enough time to do this. So don't be late. Make sure you get your exam paper uploaded to the website before the time is up. There will be 4 sections in the exam, 1 section for each of the 4 units we've studied so far. So section 1 will be unit 2, section 2 will be unit 4, section 3 will be unit 5, section 4 will be unit 6. Each of these 4 sections will have 2 parts. There will be some questions to answer. Then I will give you 1 question where I want you to write. So when you're writing, each of the 4 writing answers should be around 50 words. So this is where thinking of your extra information is going to come in very, very useful. Who, what, why, where, when, how. These are the things we need to describe in the writing. So as I said, each section of the exam will have some questions and a writing part. You can use your textbook and class handouts to help you during the exam. So because this exam will be done at home, I can't stop you looking at books, so that's what I want you to do. Look at your textbooks, maybe look at your class handouts, see if you can find some of the answers there. Last thing, if I catch anyone cheating, that is just copying papers, your score will be zero for both students. So when I see exam papers, I can usually tell when somebody has just copied someone else. If I think this has happened, I will contact both students and I will ask you some questions about your paper, and then I will be able to see if you've been cheating or not. So anybody that copies papers, I will be able to notice. A lot of the questions I will ask will be about you. So two people can't have the exact same answers. So I will be checking very, very closely for cheating. Okay, so what are the important things to study for the exam next week? Well, Unit 2, we talked about family. And in family, we looked first of all at lots of vocabulary. Things like mother, father, grandfather, grandmother, grandparents, children, son, daughter, sister, brother, parents, husband, wife. We had so many different family relationships. So it's important for next week that you understand these relationships and also how to talk about your family using have or has. So again, I have two brothers, but she has two brothers. He has one sister. So those things are going to be important in your textbook, vocabulary and grammar. And if you remember when we talked about family, we talked about making a family tree and then asking questions about these people. Things like, what does your mother do? Where does she live? How tall is she? How old is your father? Now, I've given you some examples of answers here. So I always want you to use full sentences in the answers. So what does your mother do? She's a teacher. Where does he live? He lives in Ansan in Korea. How tall is she? She is 160 centimeters tall. How old is your father? He is 57. So always be using full sentences in your answers. So again, some example questions that might come up in next week's exam. Maybe what does your best friend do? Or what does your mother do? Or what does your father do? How old is your father? Or how old is your sister? Something like that. Where does your uncle live? Where does your mother work? How often do you see your parents? So these were all types of questions we looked at in Unit 2 when we talked about our family trees. So this is just a kind of good example of the types of questions I will be asking in the exam. So for Unit 2, study the vocabulary, study have and has, and the different types of questions. For Unit 4, things to study, well, we had two different groups of vocabulary in Unit 4. Transport vocabulary, we had things like drive a car, ride a bicycle, and so on, take a taxi, walk. And we also had daily life vocabulary, get up, eat breakfast, cook dinner, watch TV, go to bed. So this vocabulary is going to be important. There will be some questions about this. Important to study that. Also, this unit, it was really important the grammar point about third person singular endings. Now, this is something I've noticed in your assignment. A lot of students are having some trouble with this. So, study it carefully. Remember, I, you, they, and we just use the normal verbs. I drive, I ride, I get, I drink. But when we're using he, she, my brother, or somebody's name, John, we're changing the end of the verb. Drives, rides, gets, drinks. So this is going to be important. If I ask a question, for example, where does your father work? Well, he works. Where do you work? I work. So it's going to be important in your answers next week that this grammar is correct. And we also studied some daily life questions. Here are some example questions. How do you get to school? Where do you travel from? How long does it take? What do you do while traveling? What are some things that you do every day? Do you watch TV every day? How often do you read the news? Do you ever exercise? What do you usually do on weekends? So these are some good examples of the types of questions I will ask next week. Notice again the difference between WH, do you, yes, no question. Yes, no question. That is going to be important in the exam next week, giving the correct answer to the yes, no, or the WH type questions. So for Unit 4, quite a lot of things to study: vocabulary, third person grammar, and these types of questions. Unit 5, again there was a lot of vocabulary. We studied online activities and free time activities. So again, things like use social media, check email, watch videos, shop online. So again, going back to Unit 4, third person singular endings will be important here as well. So I use social media, she uses social media. He watches videos, I watch videos. You eat out, he eats out. And also with the free time activities, we had the places. So we eat out at a restaurant, go dancing at a club, play soccer at the park. So lots of good vocabulary to study here. We also looked at some adverbs of frequency: always, usually, often, sometimes, hardly ever, and never. And again, the difference between yes, no type questions. Do you ever check your email? Yes, I sometimes check my email. And WH type questions. How often do you check your email? Well, here it's not a yes, no question, so no yes, no answer. I sometimes check my email. So that's important. Again, there'll be questions using these two different types of grammar. And again, we had lots of questions. These are possible questions for the exam. Things like, do you ever watch movies online? How often do you play online games? Do you ever shop online? How often do you eat out? Where do you like to hang out with your friends? Do you play any sports? Where do you like to watch movies? So a lot of different types of questions that can come up in Unit 5, but it's very important to understand the difference between this is a yes-no question. It's beginning with a verb, do. This is a WH question. So we don't answer this one yes or no. We do answer this one yes or no. So that was Unit 5. Then Unit 6. We did this over 2 different classes. So things to study in Unit 6, we had jobs and their duties. If you remember, we had lots of jobs in the textbook, and we tried to give some duties for things that they do. So a waiter serves food, a waiter takes orders, a taxi driver drives a taxi driver speaks to passengers, a doctor helps sick people, a doctor does surgery. So the jobs and what they do will be important. Also abilities: dance, sing, fix computers, and so on. That will be important as well. Some questions will be asking about these abilities. Now, also in Unit 6, we looked at WH questions. who, what, why, where, when, how. We also used questions using can, a yes, no. So if can is at the beginning, the answer will be yes or no. So can she swim? Yes, she can, or no, she can. What question? What can you do? I can fix computers. So again, it's important to know the difference between yes, no questions and WH questions. And then we had some questions for these. So again, I've just given you some examples of the types of questions. So maybe, does your mother have a job? Or does your father have a job? Do you think being a student is a good job? Where does your mother work? When do you want to get a job? What company would you like to work for? What can you do well? Can you sing? Can you draw? Can you swim? Can you play an instrument? How many languages can you speak? Talk about something you can't do but would like to do. So again, all of these are things that came up in the class. These are the types of questions I will be asking next week. So there's a lot of things to study, but most of these things we have already studied in the class assignments and the video lessons. If you've done a good job on your class assignments, read over them again. That's the best way to study for next week's exam. So, this week's assignment, what I have done is I've made a study sheet with the questions on it. So for this week's assignment, just please answer the questions in part 1 and write around 50 words for part 2. Here we go. So this is a good example. For next week, this will be like one part, one section. So here are some example questions. Where does your father work? Now remember, answer the question using a full sentence. So where does your father work? My father works in Seoul. Or my father works in a factory, whatever. And then again, I've given you a question down here. So for this, I just want you to choose one of these things. Only one. So for this, maybe write about your family. Well, write 50 words about your family. Or if you choose number 2, write about your daily routine. Write about what you do in your free time. Write about a family member's job. Or write about something you can do well. So for this part, this week, I only want you to choose one question. Okay? So this will just give you a good feeling for what the exam will be like next week. So obviously this is just one set of questions and one writing. Next week there will be 4 sets of questions, 4 writing parts. So that is your assignment for this week. Please upload your file to the e-learning website. So, just to remind everybody, your midterm exam is next week during normal class day, Wednesday. I'll post the test around 1 p.m. and I'll send a message 10 minutes before to remind everyone. And you will have 1 hour, 30 minutes to complete the exam and post it to the e-learning website. So, as usual, everyone, if you've got any questions about anything in today's lesson, there's lots of ways to contact me. You can post a question on our class Kakao group. You can send me an individual message by email or by Kakao Talk. But that is all of the information for next week. So everyone, thank you for listening today. Remember to do your class assignment and good luck with the exam next week. Bye, everybody.